She was on her knees with a mop when the Billionaire CEO barked, "Get up!" And the whole lobby watched a black janitor shrink under his pride. Morning sunlight spilled like gold across the marble atrium of Prescott Holdings, catching the gleam of glass walls and high heels. The scent of espresso drifted through the air as polished shoes clicked across the floor, echoing between ambition and ego. Shanice Miller knelt in the middle of it all, head down, mop in hand, her navy blue uniform damp at the knees. Her hands, rough from bleach and labor, moved with quiet rhythm. She just finished cleaning near the east elevator when a sharp voice cracked through the space. "What the hell?" a man shouted. She looked up too late. CEO Henry Prescott stumbled back, catching himself on a pillar. His Italian leather shoes had grazed a still-drying patch of floor. He didn't fall, but the damage was done. "Get up," he barked. The atrium stilled. Phone stopped mid-scroll. Laughter halted. Dozens of eyes turned toward her. Shanice rose slowly, deliberately, setting her mop aside. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, her voice soft but steady. There was a sign. "I don't care about your sign." Henry snapped, brushing off his sleeve as if he'd touched something vile. "You people never learn, do you?" The words hit harder than a slap. They didn't just slice the air. They cut through skin, soul, and years of survival. Shanice stood tall, even as she swallowed the burn rising in her throat. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "Hold your peace, baby. God fights for the humble." "I understand," she said, still calm. "It won't happen again." Henry scoffed, turning away. "It better not. You are lucky to even be in this building." Up on the mezzanine, Sophie Prescott clutched her coffee cup, frozen. Her father's voice still rang in her ears, but it was the janitor's eyes that held her, clear, patient, and unshaken. There was something unsettling about it, something that made Sophie's stomach twist with a guilt she couldn't quite name. Shanice returned to her mop without a word, the moment sealed in silence. Yet beneath the surface of her stillness was something deeper than defiance, something ancient and unbreakable. He didn't realize it yet, but the woman he'd just humiliated had once commanded warriors who answered only to courage, not to wealth, and before the week was over, he'd learn what true power really looked like. Henry Prescott stormed into the elevator, jabbing the button like it owed him something. The door slid shut. Upstairs, Sophie Prescott stayed still, eyes fixed on the janitor below, her own soul whispering a question she hadn't dared ask in years. "Lord, what am I supposed to do now?" If that moment moved you, if watching her stand tall in silence while the world tried to shrink her stirred something in you, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Let's dive right back into the story. The morning after the incident, the lobby hummed with whispers just beneath the hum of fluorescence and the rhythm of typing fingers. No one said Henry Prescott's name aloud, but his voice still echoed in the marble halls. He nearly slipped. She didn't even flinch. She just stood there, like a statue or something. Most eyes avoided Shanice when she entered the building, mop in hand, same navy blue uniform freshly pressed, her hair tucked beneath a plain black scarf. Some avoided her out of fear of Henry, of making waves. Others watched with something closer to awe. She didn't deserve that. One in turn muttered under her breath. Her cubicle neighbor shushed her quickly, glancing toward the executive elevator. Shanice heard it all. She always did, but she said nothing. She moved through the lobby like breath through lungs, silent, vital. Her steps were measured. Her cart was organized with surgical precision. Every motion, from the flick of her mop to the folding of a rag, was exact. It wasn't just cleaning. It was a form of discipline, a rhythm learned long before this building, long before this uniform. She paused near the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring at the city beyond. From here, the skyline looked like something you could crush in your palm. But she knew power didn't come from how high you stood. It came from what you stood for. I walked away from it all, she thought, pressing a cloth to the glass. From ranks and ribbons, from fire and command, from the only life where I ever felt truly seen. Her fingers trembled for half a second. Lord, you led me here, to mops and marble and men like Henry. So there must be purpose. Let me stay faithful to the path, even when I don't understand it. Across the atrium, Sophie Prescott lingered near the railing, staring again. She'd watched Shanice all morning, hoping, dreading, some sign of rebellion or retaliation. But there was only stillness. And that tattoo. She hadn't meant to notice it yesterday. Just a glimpse on Shanice's forearm when she'd straightened up after her apology. A crest wings, maybe. A sword. It wasn't something ordinary, and it hadn't left her mind since. That night, alone in her apartment, Sophie sat cross-legged on the couch with her laptop glowing in her lap. A half-eaten salad wilted beside her. She typed, "Military tattoo with sword and wings, Special Forces insignia's female veteran, Black woman combat unit tattoos." Page after page pulled up images. Some were close. Most weren't. But one made her stop breathing. She clicked it, enlarged it, and whispered, "No way." The cursor blinked at the top of the screen. United States Special Operations Command. Sophie couldn't sleep. She sat at her desk well past midnight, bathed in the glow of her monitor, scrolling through declassified military pages and obscure forums. The image was clear now. A winged sword wrapped in black thorns, flanked by 2 stars. The crest belonged to a division no one talked about publicly. The Blackwing Division. There were only fragments, half-sentences, and redacted documents. Footnotes buried in defense budget reports. No official photos. No interviews. Only whispers. Elite recon. Off-the-books missions. Disbanded after a classified op overseas. Sophie read aloud. Commanded by Major S. Miller. She sat back, stunned. It can't be the same Shanice Miller. Can it? Downstairs, in the glossy halls of Prescott Holdings, Henry's voice rang out from a flat-screen monitor in the executive lounge. A live news interview. He sat polished in a tailored navy suit, the skyline behind him. "At Prescott Holdings, we believe in excellence and discipline," he said smoothly. "A company, like a country, needs strong leadership to thrive." He smiled into the camera, teeth gleaming. "We reward competence. We don't tolerate mediocrity." Sophie turned away from the screen. The contrast punched her in the chest. Her father's version of leadership was about image, charm, threat dominance. Shanice's was something else entirely. Not louder, not softer, just deeper. She remembered the way Shanice stood, motionless after the insult. She hadn't resisted, hadn't cowered. Somehow, she'd held power without lifting a hand. Meanwhile, in the surveillance room, Security Chief Martin Reeves replayed the footage again. The moment Henry slipped, Shanice rising, the glance, the tattoo. He paused, zoomed, enhanced the frame. There it was, the same crest Sophie had found. Reeves wasn't new to this game. 25 years in military policing before Prescott Holdings. He'd seen combat, seen courage, seen cowards. That tattoo didn't belong to a janitor. It belonged to someone who had stood in war. He reached for the landline and punched in a number from memory. It rang twice. "Briggs," a gravelly voice answered. "Tommy, it's Reeves. I need a favor. You ever hear of Major Shanice Miller?" There was silence on the other end. Then a breath, almost reverent. "You mean the Miller?" Reeves sat up straighter. "So she's real." "Oh, she's real," Briggs said, voice low. She's the ghost they sent when no one else came back. Reeves' heart thudded. That woman disappeared after Syria. No one knew why. No one dared ask. Reeves leaned forward, eyes still on the paused screen. She's working janitorial here. Another silence. Then, God help whoever thought she was just a help. The air in the compound was thick with smoke and grit. Eagle Team, move now. Major Shanice Miller's voice sliced through the static in her comms. Her rifle was up, boots grounded, heart steady. Secure the left flank. We've got civilians behind that wall. No mistakes. Her team didn't question her. They moved because she moved. They believed because she did. The mission: hostage extraction in northern Syria. Underground facility. Black Ops oversight. No backup if it failed. Shanice led the charge. She kicked down doors, dragged children from cages, applied pressure to wounds with hands that had once held scripture beside her mentor's camp cot. She wasn't just leading soldiers. She was covering lives with her own breath. But the real threat wasn't enemy fire. It was betrayal. They found crates in the back room. Not drugs. Not bombs. American-manufactured weapons, stamped with a private logo. She recognized the insignia. She remembered the lobbying, the warnings. Prescott Tactical Systems. She called it in. Filed the report. Demanded accountability. The next week, the mission was wiped from official records. And 2 weeks later, a drone strike took out one of her own. The silence that followed buried more than evidence. It buried Shanice's faith in the system she'd bled for. Her last night on base, she sat beside her mentor, Colonel Davison, who'd taken shrapnel shielding a medic during their escape. He was fading fast. "You have to keep going," he whispered, blood on his teeth. "Live quietly if you must, but never forget who you are." She held his hand until it went still. That was the last time she wore her uniform. Now, in the spotless lobby of Prescott Holdings, her mop glided across marble as board members passed by, blind to the war-torn hands that gripped it. She said little, eyes down, voice soft, not because she was weak, because she had chosen peace. Until today, she was wiping down the elevators when 2 executives passed behind her, laughing over scotch-laced breath. "Did you hear? Henry's got a line on that old defense contract again. The weapons program the DoD shelved. Ethics board buried it for a reason. Not Henry. He's gonna make billions." Shanice froze. That name, that program, the same weapons she'd found in that compound, the ones she reported, the ones they said didn't exist. "Lord," she prayed, her heart thudding, "I didn't come here to fight. But if you brought me here for this, then I need strength. Not to survive, but to stand." She pressed her hand gently to her side, where her uniform's ribbons used to be. No one saw. No one heard. But heaven did. Someone said the janitor used to be military. Henry Prescott scoffed, leaning back in his leather chair, a tumbler of scotch in hand despite the early hour. Everyone claims they were military these days. Probably worked in a supply closet at some base in Kansas. His assistant chuckled nervously. Henry grinned wider. "She's got the mop, not the medals. Let's keep it that way." Outside his office, Sophie stood frozen, fingers clenched around a folder she no longer cared about. That laugh, sharp and dismissive, pushed her past the line she'd held since childhood. She knocked once, hard. "Dad, we need to talk." Henry waved off his assistant. "Make it quick." Sophie stepped inside. "What happened in the lobby? How you spoke to her? It was cruel. It was wrong." Henry raised an eyebrow. "You're getting soft." "No," she said firmly. "I'm getting convicted." He leaned forward. "She's a janitor, Sophie. If I start apologizing for telling people how to do their job, I might as well give up the company. She stared at him, and for the first time, saw a man who mistook fear for leadership. Downstairs, in the security suite, Martin Reeves stared at the file he'd just decrypted. Major Shanice Miller, Blackwing Division, honorably discharged. Commendations 7. Confirmed, weapons ethics whistleblower. He leaned back in his chair, letting the weight of it settle. She's not just anybody, he murmured. She's the one they tried to erase. On the monitors, camera feeds flickered. Lobby, elevators, conference wing. And there, boardroom 17. Shanice, already at work, preparing for the international contract signing. She moved with the same poise she had in uniform, measured, intentional. She dusted the long glass table, her reflection rippling across its surface like water disturbed by wind. That table had hosted arms dealers, CEOs, and presidents. Today, reflected the face of a woman they thought was invisible. Reeves pressed a button to zoom in. Her expression never changed, but something pulsed beneath her stillness. The calm before a reckoning. Upstairs, Sophie sat at her desk, unable to focus. She pulled up the photo of the tattoo again, side by side with the military file Reeves had forwarded. The match was undeniable. Her father's empire was built on power. Shanice had once wielded something far greater, and let it go. She closed the screen, her heart pounding. What am I supposed to do with this, God? She prayed silently. What does justice look like here? What does mercy look like? In the boardroom, Shanice wiped the final panel of glass and stepped back. The sun glinted through the high-rise windows, painting shadows across the table. She looked around the room, polished, ready, waiting, not just for a contract, for truth. The boardroom sparkled under the midday sun. Crystal water glasses shimmered, polished chrome pens gleamed beside thick contracts, and the marble floor was so pristine it reflected ambition like a mirror. Diplomats, foreign investors, military liaisons, and reporters filled the long table. Suits, medals, and manicured smiles. At the head, Henry Prescott stood, adjusted his tie, and tapped a finger against the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice smooth as silk. Prescott Holdings is proud to enter this new era of global defense innovation. We are a company founded on 3 pillars: discipline, command, and excellence. Flashes from media cameras lit the air. We don't just lead with strength, we define it. Behind him, unnoticed at first, the janitor entered. Shanice moved with practiced quiet, pushing her cart along the edge of the room. She wasn't scheduled to be there, but she'd asked to clean early. Reeves had approved it. As she reached for a cloth to wipe the glass behind the projector, her sleeve slipped. Just for a second, but that was all it took. The tattoo, black and gleaming in the light, caught the eye of a visiting U.S. Army colonel seated near the back. His brow furrowed. Then Reeves entered. He didn't knock, didn't clear his throat, just walked straight down the aisle. A man carrying truth like a loaded weapon. "Mr. Prescott," he said, voice crisp, "we need to pause the meeting." Henry turned, irritated. "This isn't the time, Reeves." "It's exactly the time." He laid a folder on the glass table, flipping it open. Pages spread like a flood, documents, photos, records stamped confidential, and now not. "Ladies and gentlemen," Reeves said, eyes sweeping the room, "you've all heard Mr. Prescott's views on leadership, but allow me to introduce someone who actually lived it." He turned to Shanice. "This is Major Shanice Miller, former commander of the Blackwing Division, 7-time decorated combat leader, specialist in rescue operations, ethics enforcement, and national security. She risked her life for the freedoms we all enjoy, only to mop these floors under a man who never bothered to learn her name." Silence fell like a curtain. The colonel stood slowly, eyes locked on hers. "Major Miller," he said, voice tight with awe. "Permission to salute?" Shanice nodded once. He lifted his hand. Every breath in the room caught. Henry's face drained of color. "You've all built your futures on words like honor and courage," Shanice said softly, her voice finally cutting through the hush. "But respect isn't granted by rank, sir. It's earned by character." She didn't look at Henry again. She just turned, pushed her cart, and walked out, unhurried, unshaken, unseen no more. Behind her, Henry gripped the edge of the podium, knuckles white. The contract pages trembled in the silence, unread. For once, he had nothing to say. Rain lashed against the glass walls of Prescott Holdings, turning the marble floors gray with reflection. Outside, the wind howled like something ancient had finally awakened. Shanice stepped through the lobby's sliding doors, the same ones where she'd once been humiliated. But today no one whispered. No one looked away. Her cart remained behind. She no longer needed it. She reached the sidewalk, just as thunder cracked across the sky. The storm soaked her within seconds, but she didn't flinch. Water ran down her cheeks like memory. Behind her, the door slammed open. "Shanice, wait." Henry Prescott stumbled out into the rain, suit jacket flapping, hair plastered to his forehead. His shoes splashed across the pavement as he chased her down the steps. She paused, only slightly. He stopped a few feet away, breath heaving, eyes red, not with rage, but something Messier. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" he asked. She turned toward him, quiet, steady. "Would you have listened?" He looked down, ashamed. I didn't know. About Syria. About the Black Wing. About any of it." She nodded once. "And yet you spoke to me like you did." The rain soaked them both now, erasing titles and power. "I built this company to prove something," Henry admitted. "To men like my father. To the senators who laughed when I pitched my first deal. To the investors who only took me seriously when I started acting like them." He exhaled. "I became this, and I don't know how to stop." Shanice tilted her head, eyes narrowing, not in judgment, but in recognition. "You lead a company," she said, "but you've never led yourself." He blinked. The words struck deeper than any boardroom failure. They exposed the hollowness he'd kept hidden even from himself. "I see now," he whispered, "that I've stood on stages, shouting about discipline, while men and women like you bled quietly behind the curtain." A long silence stretched between them, filled only by rain and God. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said. She looked at him, not as a CEO, not as a man in shame, but as a soul. "I wasn't sent here to break you, Henry," she said softly. "But maybe you needed something broken." She stepped back, didn't offer absolution, didn't offer wrath, just left him with silence. The kind that echoes after the truth has been spoken, the kind where change begins. As she disappeared into the rain, Henry stood motionless. For once, he didn't reach for power, or applause, or control. He just stood there, and let all fall. 1 week later, the atrium of Prescott Holdings didn't shimmer with ego. It pulsed with purpose, gone were the champagne toasts and foreign contracts. In their place, rows of folding chairs, banners reading veterans to visionaries, and portraits of service members lined the walls. American flags stood at every corner, not for show, but in honor. Sophie Prescott moved through the crowd with focused energy. This was her event, every detail planned with care. She hadn't slept much, but she'd never felt more awake. In the front row, Shanice sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. No uniform, no mop, just herself, centered, calm, hesitant. She didn't want to be here, But she came, not for recognition, for witness. At the podium, Henry Prescott adjusted the mic. He wore no power tie today, just a dark suit, plain, respectful. His usual bravado was gone, replaced by something slower, realer. He cleared his throat. "Some of you know me as the man who runs this tower," he began. "And until recently, that's all I cared about. Towers, deals, winning." He looked across the crowd, not above it. But leadership isn't built in boardrooms. It's forged in sacrifice, in silence, in courage that never asks for applause. He paused. "I want to publicly apologize to Major Shanice Miller, and to every veteran I've overlooked in the name of profit." A hush fell, then the sound of cameras clicking. "We are launching the Miller Initiative, a nationwide program to support veterans as they transition into civilian life. We'll provide jobs, housing assistance, and mental health support, not because it looks good, but because it's right." A wave of applause built slowly, then rose to a standing ovation. Henry stepped aside. Sophie touched Shanice's arm gently. "You don't have to speak, but if you want to." Shanice stood, not because she wanted to, because her silence had already spoken. Now, a few words were needed to complete the circle. She walked to the mic, looked out over the crowd. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just stood tall. "People talk a lot about greatness," she began, voice steady. "They think it's noise, fame, victory." She paused. "But I've seen greatness. It doesn't shout. It just keeps standing. In mud, in grief, in hospital tents, in empty kitchens at 3 a.m. She looked over at Henry, then at Sophie. "Honor doesn't need stage. It just needs a place to breathe." She stepped down to another wave of applause, louder now, not for show, but from the soul. Henry met her halfway and extended his hand. She took it. No performance, no pretense, just forgiveness without flattery. The city was still asleep when Shanice stepped through the glass doors of Prescott Holdings one last time. No crowd, no cameras, no whispers, just the hush of dawn and the soft rhythm of her boots on polished stone. A simple duffel bag hung from her shoulder, nothing flashy, just worn canvas and memories stitched into every seam. She paused in the atrium. Same marble, same silence, but the weight in the air had changed. Sophie was waiting by the curb, arms wrapped around herself in the morning chill. Her breath misted in the air as Shanice approached. "You really don't want a car?" "I've walked away from harder things," Shanice replied with a small smile. "This one's light." They stood there for a moment, two women shaped by the same building in very different ways. "I meant what I said," Sophie offered. "The Miller Initiative isn't just a press release. I'm in this. I hope you'll stay connected." "I believe you," Shanice said, "and I will." They hugged, no spotlight, no show. Just something human, honest. Inside the building, behind tinted glass, Henry watched them from the lobby. No longer towering, no longer performing, just watching. His reflection blurred across the window, distorted, humbled. He didn't try to interrupt, didn't try to fix. Just let her go with the reverence of someone who finally understood the value of silence. Shanice turned toward the sunrise. Light spilled across the pavement, brushing the concrete with gold, catching in the wet lines of the sidewalk like veins of mercy. She took a deep breath. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a ghost. Not a warrior forgotten, not a mistake erased, but a person, seen not for the medals she earned or the mistakes she carried, but for the soul that stayed standing through it all. She looked once more at the glass tower behind her. Some people measured power in skyscrapers and shares. She measured it in grace, the kind that kneels to serve and still stands taller than any man who ever tried to break her. She adjusted the strap of her bag and walked into the new day.
If this story stirred something in your spirit, a reminder that God sees what man overlooks, that grace can stand where pride falls, and that true power comes from the heart led by Him, then like, share, and subscribe. And let us know where you're watching from, because someone else may need to be reminded God lifts the humble in His time.